government security enterprise. And from the cartel's perspective, the reason this is so important is that we in the West, we consider Middle East terrorist organizations here. We put them above, gangs, cartels, all of this because of what happened to us from 9/11. But when you look at it from the cartel's perspective, who have control of the logistics into our country, from their perspective, they're in charge. And in their backyard, they are in charge. Make no doubt about it. There's not a terrorist organization in the world that's more powerful than them in their own backyard. So you have to collaborate with them. You have to pay the piece or the tax and the money to get into this country. And we see it play out all along. Look, let's talk about the Chinese like Michael just talked about. He's absolutely right. The Zetas, formerly known as Zetas, now known as Cartel del Noreste, they're moving about 35 Chinese at a time, almost every night, into Phnom Penh. Right before they cross, what do they make them do? Drop their passports, because they know as soon as they cross and turn themselves into Border Patrol, they have no idea who they really are. What does that do? That holds up the line, and then from there, the cartel can move deadly drugs into the country and a lot of munitions southbound.
And Jason, you mentioned the cartels getting money from this, and it seems a lot of the immigrants coming over are not really claiming asylum. They're citing economic woes. But how are they even getting the money to come here? Randy, tell us about the economics of migration.
Well, so there's money everywhere, especially for the cartels. They're very diversified. They don't just specialize in one thing. We know that highest drugs are going to be heroin, methamphetamine, and they still even dabble in marijuana, but they're into extortions, kidnappings. So they get their money from wherever they can. And the ones that they most focus on are the ones that are most profitable. We know some of the smuggling fees that people from mainland China pay are in the $50,000 range right now, according to debriefings that sources in the Border Patrol told me about. So they're capturing that money all the way through Mexico. The Mexican cartels are. But at times, they're even overwhelmed by those people that are coming in mass to the border. I was in Mexico just the beginning of September when 3,000 Venezuelans, mostly Venezuelans, hopped off a freight train and hit the border at one time. Well, the cartel doesn't have a mechanism to control that. They're going to get to those that they can get to, that have the money, that are going to pay and make it profitable. But the way our border has gone out of control, it's even overwhelming for them because they don't have the mechanism to deal with 3,000 people crossing in one fell swoop any more than the United States government.
Heartfelt thank you to those who served. We begin this newscast with our top story this hour. President Biden marketing this Veterans Day, laying a wreath on the tomb of the unknown soldier, delivering remarks at the Memorial Amphitheater.
Folks, as a nation, we owe them. We owe you. Not just for keeping the flame of freedom burning during the darkest of moments, but for serving our communities even after they hang up their uniforms, for inspiring the next generation to serve. We see this at barracks and bases all across America, where young women and men continue to risk their own safety for the safety of their fellow Americans.
Continuing our Veterans Day coverage now, Newsnet's Washington correspondent David Ade speaking with veterans in our nation's capital, filing this report from Washington, D.C.
Washington, D.C. is home to several national memorials honoring those who died in service to the United States. But for some surviving veterans that I spoke with, they say that it can be hard accepting being honored on Veterans Day.
Yeah, I'm Joe Bradshaw.
His service time during the Vietnam War.
Joined the Navy in 67 and was in the Navy from 67 to 73.
Visiting the National Vietnam Veterans Memorial, which displays the names of the more than 58,000 men and women who died in the war, is emotional.
I was speechless and overwhelmed with grief that some of the people that I went to school with died in Vietnam, in the military. And it's just a precious reminder of the price that was paid.
I met Bradshaw when he visited Washington, D.C. aboard an honor flight from Ohio.
It's not easy letting people honor you.
Honor flights are meant to honor and celebrate veterans' service and sacrifice.
A lot of times I don't really feel worthy about being here because people have sacrificed more than I have.
A feeling shared by veterans of more recent wars. Ernest Buckman served in Afghanistan and Iraq.
The World War II veterans, I think they've seen a lot more action and hard times than what we have. Not taking anything away from my generation of veterans and the Iraqi guys and all that.
While accepting honor can be hard, on this Veterans Day weekend, Bradshaw hopes people take a moment to think about the sacrifice.
Just remember that somebody paid the price for the air they're breathing today.
Just say thank you. That's all they want to hear, honestly. They
Come
wanna
home.
hear,
Welcome
"Thank you
home."
for your service.
In a proclamation ahead of Veterans Day, President Joe Biden called the nation's veterans the solid steel backbone of the U.S. and asked for all Americans to observe 2 minutes of silence in their honor. In Washington, I'm David Aid for Newsnet.
Turning now to news from the Middle East, Saudi Arabia hosting an Islamic summit calling for an end to the war in Gaza while rejecting the justification of Israel's actions as self-defense. It comes as pressure mounts on Israel over the soaring number of civilian casualties. Tens of thousands of Palestinian civilians sheltering in the grounds of Al-Shifa Hospital, moving south, searching for safety. An Israeli defense official says their forces are not firing on the hospital, but rather there are clashes with Hamas militants around it, adding that people there can still leave the hospital safely. According to the Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry, at least 11,000 Palestinians have been killed in 5 weeks of war. Meantime, pro-Palestinian demonstrations around the world today demanding a ceasefire, including a large rally outside President Biden's Delaware home. Back in the U.S., the war causing waves here, more than 1,600 Harvard University alumni saying they will withhold donations to the school until it takes action to address anti-Semitism on campus. It's part of a wave of challenges to colleges across the country addressing hate speech triggered by the Israel-Hamas war. The Harvard College Jewish Alumni Association was formed last month in the wake of the school's response to the October 7th attacks on Israel. Organizers say it is the first Jewish alumni association in the history of the university. The group asking for Harvard to address several matters, including recognizing their alumni association as a formal special interest group. It also wants to help ensure the safety of Jewish students on campus and officially adopt the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism. Meantime, Travis Snyder is a Marine Corps veteran raising money for veterans' mental health. Newsnet's Madison Schlegel sitting down with him to hear his story.
Walking a mile or thousands in someone's shoes comes second nature for Michigan Marine Corps veteran Travis Snyder. Coming home from Afghanistan in 2018, adjusting to everyday life became even harder after learning the loss of one of his military brothers.
It was April of 2019 that we lost one of our brother, Jeff Hughes, to suicide. And he was an awesome Marine.
Since Snyder putting his mental health on the forefront, walking 2,590 miles to raise awareness for veterans and people who are struggling.
The magnitude of the effect of the suicide epidemic and just how great veteran mental health needs are in our community. I thought I knew, but I really didn't.
The U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs says that data shows on average 16 veterans die by suicide every day. Snyder looks to find hope, starting journeys walking across his home state all the way to walking an entire circle around Lake Michigan, posting about the people, surprises, and veterans he meets along the way.
It's effortless, and it's genuine and wholehearted, and that's like one of the most beautiful things about these adventures and this community that we've built through these adventures.
On his journey, connecting people to resources they need.
The main organization that I've advocated for these last several years has been the Mission 22 organization, which works nationwide to help veteran men and women and their families work through mental health challenges and find both professional support as well as support within other veteran organizations and local help too.
And says whether you're a veteran or not, to find community.
We want to bring in anybody who can, relate to the cause one way or another.
If you or someone you love is struggling, call the Suicide and Crisis Hotline at 988. Reporting for Newsnet, Madison.
This day, President Woodrow Wilson, who also started the draft in World War I, originally proclaimed November 11th, 1919 as Armistice Day. That was to mark the end of World War I on November 11th, 1918, which was believed to be, quote, the war to end all wars. Unfortunately, of course, it was not the last major conflict. In 1954, after fighting in the Korean War ended, President Dwight D. Eisenhower officially renaming the November 11th federal holiday Veterans Day. Eisenhower led Allied forces to victory in World War II, which turned out to be a much greater humanitarian disaster than the First World War. While the Veterans Day holiday does not move from November 11th, it is often celebrated on the Friday before or the Monday after if it falls on a weekend day. For the rest of the semester, the school saying it's because Students for Justice in Palestine and Jewish Voice for Peace are repeatedly violating school policies. School officials citing an event Thursday afternoon involving threatening rhetoric and
Oh, bummer.
of the Special Committee for Campus Safety releasing a statement saying in part, quote, like all student groups, SJP and JVP are required to abide by university procedures and policies. This ensures both the safety of our community and that core university activities can be conducted without disruption. In Detroit, to negative from stable. The move increases the chances it will downgrade the country's credit worthiness, and the country will lose its last outstanding credit rating of AAA. Moody's citing the nation's worsening fiscal strength and extreme partisanship in Washington as contributing factors behind the move. It comes as the nation is just 1 week away from a possible government shutdown. Standard & Poor's downgraded the U.S. for the first time in 2011 following a debt ceiling standoff that year. Fitch Ratings followed suit this past August after the most recent debt ceiling debate. Stabbing of a Detroit synagogue leader is released. Samantha Lowe was president of Isaac Agree Downtown Synagogue. She was found stabbed to death outside her Detroit home back in October 21st, hours after returning from a wedding. Detroit police Wednesday announcing the suspect was in custody, but also saying the recent release did not, quote, represent the conclusion of our work in this case. Wald's death had stoked speculation that it could be tied to anger over the Israel-Hamas war, but Detroit's police chief says the attack does not appear to be a result of anti-Semitism. Stabbing of a Detroit synagogue leader is released. Samantha Lowe was president of Isaac Agree Downtown Synagogue. She was found stabbed to death outside her Detroit home back in October 21st, hours after returning from a wedding. Detroit police Wednesday announcing the suspect was in custody, but also saying the recent release did not, quote, represent the conclusion of our work in this case. Wald's death had stoked speculation that it could be tied to anger over the Israel-Hamas war, but Detroit's police chief says the attack does not appear to be a result of anti-Semitism.
I was very interested in elections ever since I was 8 years old. I was interested in how they count the votes, how each state reports it by precinct, and I've always had a passion for helping the American people. I think that's number one. We need more bipartisanship. The far, far right and the far, far left, they have something in common. They're two clowns in the same suit.
So let me get that straight then. You say the far right and the far left are what?
Two clowns in the same suit.
Wow. Out of the mouths of a young man who's looking at America, and you're not even old enough to vote
Not
yet.
even old enough to vote. That's right. I can't vote until 2026.
Okay, and are you ready to do that?
I'm ready to do that. As a Jewish American, I feel proud to live in this country. This country has given me so much opportunity. My great-grandpa, my great-grandma, they fled the Holocaust. My great-grandma was an Olympic swimmer. She lived in Yugoslavia. Her and her husband were very fortunate to make it to the United States. And when they got here, they were living in a bad area, a very, very bad area. Guess what? They worked their way up, and they eventually lived the American dream in New York City and made their way. And for all the people who, live in bad areas, you can do it too. Everyone can live the American dream. But it matters on you. All these other factors, there's other factors that influence you. Do not fall into that. Do not get brainwashed by anyone. Do not allow anyone to tell you what to do. You decide your future for yourself. If you see people committing crime, if you see people acting bad, do the opposite. Do the right thing.
What are your concerns as a Jewish American about the rise that we've seen in anti-Semitism, as well as people protesting on the streets against Israel?
I think it's insane. I think you can't cure stupid and you can't cure mental illness. I think that's another issue that we have in this country. A lot of these people who believe that is because they're brainwashed by teachers, right? Especially college kids. A lot of college kids, these woke teachers, these woke influencers, they say, right, they're casuals. They don't know much about history, right? All they know is that Israel exists and that Gaza and West Bank that there's a conflict. That's all they know.
So what do you want people in America's schools your age to understand about the future of America?
I think we need to support our allies, but I also think we need to have a good conservative culture.
Well, let me ask you this. What do you hope for your future?
My future is I hope that people can see each other as people. That's it.
And I'm speaking to Driana Sixto, who is a representative of Turning Point Action. What does Turning Point